Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showcasing a strategy that is taking over the high elo in Age of Empires 2. It's a brand new strategy that's recently come up and the pros absolutely love it. We're eating it up and we're running it on ladder games on Arabia and also in tournament play on any open land map and also on some hybrid maps as well. It's a very strong and very flexible strategy and it's a breath of fresh air from all the U pudding and the Huang rushes that we've seen. Those cheesy strategies can be cast aside for a second. Let's take a look at this beautiful, very well-rounded strategy that I'm going to go ahead and break down for you guys in this video. I'll talk about why it works, what is it, and its pros and cons, and also talk about some counter strategies so you're not left in the dark when you're facing the strategy on the rank ladder as well. Before I hop deep into the video though, I want to quickly shout out a very nice announcement here. I've got a brand new tournament for the community in my Discord, open to all ELOs, $200 at least cash prize for myself, and it's a massive success. We did one for TTL, and this edition is going to be the Warlords 2 edition. So the same tournament, the same format that the pros will play, you guys can play it. All ELOs welcome in my Discord. Join there if that's interesting. All the information is also present there for how to sign up. You have until October 28th, so don't wait for it. Go. Check that out if you're interested. And without that said, let's hop into the video. Alright, so the new strategy that's taking over the meta here is the Spear Skirm Trash Rush. It is so freaking strong, yet it sounds so freaking weak. It's definitely interesting. So what is the strategy? Let's first of all break it down. The idea of the strategy is to start right away in Feudal Age by dropping a barracks on the way up, then making a range as you hit Feudal Age, and then immediately making a few spearmen and sending them forward. When the range is completed, we send skirmishers from the range forward as well in combination with the spears. The idea is that you're going to attack your opponent in such a fast time with your initial scout, 2 to 3 spearmen, and 1 to 2 skirms. That is your first initial rush. This sounds very lackluster, but if you really consider it, the skirms are a range unit that can harass villagers for free, and the spears move faster than vills, so you can hit and run vills all day long. Also, you have enough units where if you trap a villager, you can kill it and chase it down with your scouts. Furthermore, let's dive a little deeper here. If your opponent opens scouts, he cannot fight your spearmen. And if you open archers, he cannot fight your skirmishers. So no matter what you're up against, you're going to be completely fine with the strategy. The one caveat you might be thinking about is what if your opponent opens infantry, men-at-arms, or a drush, for example? Well, in this case, the skirms actually move faster than the men-at-arms and the militia, and any form of infantry, really. And so does the spear. So the reality of it is that even though your opponent could be on men-at-arms or could be on militia, you can outmaneuver that army with your skirms. And while you don't counter that unit, you do only 1 damage to it. Over time, as you mass up more and more skirms, more and more spears, you can actually overpower the men-at-arms and overpower the militia, and so you're even winning against that strategy. It's a very strong early rush that also scales very well into the mid-feudal age, because yes, you're only rushing with 3 skirms, maybe 2-3 spears, but as the feudal age goes on, you're going to add more and more skirms and spears. And so the rush continues to build up and actually ends up being a pretty formidable army in the mid-feudal age. Okay, that's the strategy, that's the gist of it. Your goal is going to be to harass your opponent's villagers and kind of hit and run, be super annoying until your opponent starts taking bad trades and you start to build up advantage slowly over feudal age. Now, let's take a look at why it's even strong and really how this strategy actually performs in the meta. So the first strong point about the strategy is the fact that it has a cheap army, or that it is a cheap army. Skirms and spears are very fast producing and cheap. In fact, skirms produce faster than archers and spears produce faster than militia. So no matter how you look at it, spears and skirms are just cheap and fast and get on the field super quickly. So you almost always gain the initiative with the strategy. You also have crazy bonuses like the Koreans discount, the Byzantine discount, the Lithuanian speed boost for these units. That could also be another angle for the strategy to be super strong in certain cases. Another reason why the strategy is strong is because it lets you attack first. You attack really fast, but as I mentioned earlier, it continues to scale into feudal age. You don't stop after 3 spears and 3 skirms. After you make that initial rush, you seed farms, whatever, you develop at home the economy, and then you slowly add in more and more units. You can choose between spears or skirms depending on the situation, and your army gets larger and larger. And it's a range unit, a melee unit, and the scout that's like your mobility aspect of the strategy. And it's basically, if you really think about it, a full-on composition within 2 minutes of feudal age. It's a perfect comp, a range unit, a melee unit, and some mobility. Although we're talking about smaller scales of number here, it still has the same concept at what large-scale post-imperial age composition is looking like. The next point that makes it very strong is the fact that it's very flexible. Depending on what you're up against, after the initial rush of like 2 spear, 2 skirm, you see what your opponent's doing. If he's doing scouts, you just spam more spears, and you only add add a few more skirms to continue harassing. If your opponent's on archers, you add more skirms, and you don't really add more spears because you don't need them. You just have the 2 to hit villagers early, and then after that you can just go pure skirm until your opponent makes a stable. Then you start adding in more spearmen, and so you have the flexibility based on what your opponent does to respond as you see fit. And that's such a powerful thing. No other strategy really has this without committing another building. If you go archers and your opponent's on skirm, you have to commit to a stable. And if you're going, for example, for a scout rush to start and your opponent's on archer spear, you have to make a range then and go skirmishers. You need an extra building. But this one, you don't need the extra building. Your 2 buildings initially give you that flexibility built in. And this is another couple things that I think make the strategy very strong, is that it doesn't spread you too thin early game. Like, you don't need a mining camp, you don't need gold, and so you're saving 100 wood. You also don't need to defend your gold or your gold vills. So on defense, you have your 2 lumber camps or your 1 lumber camp, depending on your setup, your berry bush, and that's it. That's all you need to defend. Everything else is under your TC, either hunt or straggler tree or farms. You don't need to defend a lot, so you're not spread too thin. You're not taking gold that you might get forced off of, or gold that only goes towards archers. Your wood and your food goes towards your vills, your farms, your buildings, and your army. And that's a very powerful thing to have in the feudal age. That's why scout rushing is so good. And then the last strong point for the strategy is the fact that it helps slower civs like Teutons, Slavs, Koreans. It helps give them something that's less predictable than a scout rush. It gives them something that's more flexible. Like, the good part about an archer rush for certain archer civs is that you get to, chill back archers wall, and then you're a little bit, flexible. The good part about a drush or a men at arm rush is that you're flexible behind it. You make it, you get the initial impact, and then you're flexible. Civs with an eco bonus like Ethiopians can pull those strategies off very effectively. But slower civs like Teutons, you only get your bonuses, your savings, as you seed more and more farms. You're not seeding 20 farms within 2 minutes of feudal age. If you're doing that, you're cheating or something crazy is going on. Usually you seed like a few farms and you keep adding one every like 20-30 seconds. And so over time, Teutons get crazy. But in early feudal age, they're not quite there yet. So if you open stable with Teutons and your opponent just counters you with archer spears, then all of a sudden you have to make a range. You have to make skirms. Where are you going to get the wood to make farms? Even if they're cheaper, where there's only so much that you can have. And so as you can see, these slower civs were just getting abused before, getting harassed early, forced into all kinds of transitions, and then they just fall behind. With this new strategy, they're the ones that can attack first. They're the ones that can put the pressure, and then behind it, they can seed those farms. They can gain the advantage. They can build up over time, and then it keeps them flexible later on, as I'll get into a bit later. And so now these slower civilizations, they can either go for a scout rush, which is their preferred strategy, or if they feel like they're up against a very fast civ, they can try to match that speed by going for the spear skirm rush, and then later on, they can transition into cavalry if they see fit. And one final reason that this strategy is extremely strong is the fact that the pros have found a really nice way to micro the spears against the scouts. In the past, when you had a spear against 3 scouts, you just kind of stand there. You hit once, maybe hit twice with the spear, and then it dies. But recently, pros have discovered if you hit once with the spear and then you run the spear away, the scouts will get like 1 or 2 hits on the spear, but they won't surround it. And so they don't kill it. Then the spear can hit again and then continue running. And with this method, 1 spear completely destroys 3 scouts. Like, you're gonna kill 1.5 scouts minimum, maybe even more. And this simple discovery of spearman micro just makes the spears way more effective at feudal age and kind of completes the strategy and makes it very effective against an early scout rush. And I think this discovery is what led to this new strategy being popular. Alright, now let's talk about the flexibility of the strategy, which I've teased earlier. Now, the cool thing about the strat, right, you open skirms and you open spears. This army is not that impressive in Castle Age because skirms and pikes all of a sudden get exposed by one major weakness. They die to Squire's longsword, and they die to siege. Those 2 things are not available in the feudal age. Squire longswords, especially with gambesons, they take no damage, basically, to both units, and they run faster than them, or at least they run faster than the skirms. The pikes still can outrun, but the skirms will get chased down. And so the longswords are now a viable strat to counter this composition, and siege destroys this composition. And so skirm or elite skirm plus pikemen is not always what the strategy builds up to in Castle Age. After your feudal age rush is completed, you're walled at home, you can then switch into knights if you're a cav civ. You can then switch into 2 range archers if you're an archer civ. You can then switch into 3 TC boom with a monastery. You can do whatever you want, because if you don't need to upgrade to elite skirm, then you save all that wood, which goes into a town center or another production building. And since you're already on spears and skirms, your opponent can't just go crossbow and look for a timing attack, because then you just go elite skirmisher. And if he just goes for knights to try to pressure, you can just go pikemen and stay on defense with the pikes until you figure something else out. And if they don't try to pressure you, you can then be the guy who attacks, or then you can develop your economy. As you can see, this army, although it's not an aggressive army, you can't go elite skirm and pike and just continue attacking castle. You don't have that option. So attacking castle not really your strength with the strategy. But you have a really good and flexible defensive option based on what your opponent does, and you have a really good transition off of it into economy or into some soft military like 1 Stable Knights or 2 Range Expo to control the map. And this is a very powerful tool. A flexible strategy like this beats out on the U puddings and the Huang rushes because those strategies are one trick. They're too much commitment. This one keeps you flexible into Castle Age and keeps your opponent guessing. Alright, that's basically the gist of the strategy. Now quickly we're going to run through some counter strats and some weaknesses just so you guys aren't completely blind to this if you see it on the ranked ladder. So what I've noticed is that scouts into skirms is usually easier to control, and I would consider it a counter strategy. So if your opponent goes scouts, if he just switches into skirms really fast, he'll be doing well. Don't switch into archers. If you're going scouts, don't switch into archers, because if you switch into archers, you first of all have to go to gold, and second of all, they produce slower. So you won't get enough archers to deal with the spears. Going to skirms lets you be a little tankier so the skirms can't kill you as fast, and lets you still deal with the enemy spearmen. The second counter strategy that I found is that going straight up skirmishers on defense, like 1 range skirms, don't make a single spear, can sometimes be better because you're just staying on defense, and without the spears you have maybe a slightly better economy or more skirmishers, and so then you can just stay safe at home, defend with the skirms, and then you're safe to Castle Age. You know, your opponent's strategy is not doing a whole lot since you're basically mirroring it, but you're doing it better. Since you don't need the spears, they don't really impact if it's skirm versus skirm. If you do this though, be aware that the skirm spear player can switch into scouts with his flexibility. Since he's attacking you, you won't really see what he's doing. If he switches to scouts, he could catch you off guard. That's the only downside to this counter strat. Okay, now just some general downsides to the spear skirm strategy. Number one is that you don't break walls very fast. So if your opponent is fully walled early, you can't really break in. And so the strat is kind of hoping your opponent is not walled. In fact, he kind of has to be open for the strat to find any damage. And the second major downside, in my opinion, is that you have a low potential of damage. With the spear skirm, you're never going to kill 5 fills. You're never going to end the game with an early feudal age. It's not like a meta arm rush that could just straight up destroy your opponent if he doesn't react properly. So for that reason, I would only recommend it to someone who's comfortable playing, past feudal age, someone who's comfortable taking it slow, doesn't have to win early. And if you're that person, the strat's great. But if you're looking for a lot of damage, then the strategy is not for you because you're not going to get it. You'll kill fills, maybe 1 or 2 early, and then more later on, but you're never going to end the game within 2 minutes unless your opponent just flat out rage quits. So in conclusion, I really love the strategy. I think it's a fair yet powerful strategy, and I also think it's one that kind of balances out the meta. Like before, the stronger, fast-paced early game civs were dominating Arabia because you just, do a little bit of damage, market, sell stone, go up, crossbows, GG, game's over. Now, the slower civs have a chance. They can attack early, spear skirm, super flexible, and then get a chance for their bonuses to kick in. And I think that's what Age of Empires 2 is really about. Keeping both sides with options and seeing who's the better player over the course of the game and not just over a couple early game cheesy moves. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.